Hi class, let's talk about how to create class objects and put them into an array. You can create actually any array of any class, just like when we were creating array of ints, array of other data types. It's the syntax actually is very similar. So this is the demo we are going to do. I want to point out that the money.h and money.cpp is exactly the same like in the last video. That's the power of separate compilation, because we can reuse the same class, make sure that it works great, of course, but then we can use it in other programs. That's one of the power of separate compilation. So let's look at the code. This is actually going to be our input file. You see there's 5 numbers. We are going to find out which number is the biggest amount of money. Just to show you a little bit, you don't have to do this nowadays, because you have an IDE that do all this for you, but you can see that we are creating 2 objects, one out of the class and one out of the program file, and then we are going to link the 2 objects into the executable. That's actually what we talked about in the last video, and since we are here, might as well show you. So money.h, money.cpp has no changes. We are going to just have a new main file, and like for any compilation for separate that's separately compiled, we have to tell the compiler where to find the code for money, otherwise there it couldn't compile. And this is the declaration of an array of money. You can see that it's exactly the same like an int or a double. Nothing actually changed. We are going to input a file name. It will be request when we run the program to input the file name, and then we would read in all the money amount into an array that we declare, the amount array, and then we will find out which is the biggest, and then we will output the result, and then we will close the file. Let me actually run the program for you so that we so I know it's messy, so let's run this again. Enter the file name, and you see that we were able to output 65.4, and then at the end we actually also use the get value to output, just to show you how to call a member function. So it's like we basically use it like it's standalone, and then use the dot notation just like before to call a member function. Okay, let's go back to the slides. I'm going to talk more about each the main program, the main.cpp, or the main function, because the file name actually is different. So since this is a new concept, I'm going to remind you again to remember to do put the include in there with double quote. And this part is just to open file, which I think you're very familiar already. You don't need me to remind you that you need to test if the input stream actually has been opened correctly. So the second part, we declare a money array called amount. We also have a max money, which will save the biggest amount, and then is going to equal to amount 0. Interestingly, we are going to not, or we have to do something else to make this actually work completely correctly. Anyways, we and then we have index. So index I equals to 0, and maximum, the index of the maximum amount equals to 0. That's how we set it in the beginning, and then we will read the first data from the file and set it to equals to max. I want to point out about this line of code. This is actually really why I do it this way this time when I do the demo, to have the code in the PowerPoint, because when I look at your labs, a lot of you are using end of file, which is not really the most efficient way when you are reading a whole number or a string. I mean, of course, there are different ways. You can do whatever you want, but when you use end of file, there's something that you need to know, is you need to read past the end of file to be able to know that you already arrived at end of file. And I think I saw a few implementation that that wasn't the case, and so you didn't read the data that you were expecting correctly. So I want to remind you, you can actually do it this way. This was discussed in our module 6, and there was a demo in there. I will have the demo in the next slide, or the link to it, or the file name actually. So to talk about this line of code, what it does, is it first increments I by 1. So now after this, I will equal to 1 now. And then because I is smaller than 5, and when we try to read in the amount, it actually also will return a boolean of true. So both are true. True and true equals to true, so it will go in here, the body. So if max is smaller than the number that we just input, it will set max equals to the amount, and set the maximum index equals to 1. This code is also interesting in that it wouldn't it will actually stop here. If I is equal to 5, this will evaluate to false. Then it will actually never go into this part of the code. Why we care about this is because we don't want to go past the array. So we don't want to say amount 5, because amount 5 will go past the array, and you don't know what's going to happen, or you will overwrite some kind of data that you didn't expect, right? So this to me is the best way to read from a file if you are reading a number, especially, or in this case we have overloaded this operator, right? The to input data from a file, and so it's actually expecting some kind of or expecting a syntax of a $ 5.40, for example, or there's a negative is also okay. I should show you the code again. If you remember from the last module, we actually overload this operator, because you actually don't need the I smaller than 5 if you are just keep reading and you are not putting it in an array, because it will stop automatically. It will just see numbers and it will input. If there's no number, it will stop, because the while will test if this statement will return true. So if you want to get a review of this, really go to the video in module 6 and watch it again. We did talk about this way. In a way, I don't want to see end of file anymore unless we are picking in every character. When we discuss end of file, it was about taking one character in a time and examine them. And so end of file, so EOF works. But if you are inputting a string or inputting a in or a double, that actually is not really the best way. So just want to stress that. So this is the demo file you can download from the module 6, and watch the video if you are still not clear what I was trying to convey, or just ask me question, right? Always you can set up an appointment with me. So the last part is pretty simple. We are just outputting the data we found and pointed out to you already that this is a class object, and to call a function or a public function from a object, you use the dot notation with the name of the function. Just so to reiterate, you create an array of money just like creating an integer of array. And to access the function, you use the dot, and to input something, if you overloaded this operator, you can actually use the same notation. That's why we overload this arrow operator. I was going to show you the code. So if you look at the money.h, you see we have a friend function that overloaded or this one, the in-stream, the operator, and then we have code in here. We are expecting I think in the .h there where you're supposed to write the documentation, so something like this is what's expected to be input. So go back to the slide to just recap what we talked about in this video: how to create and use an array of class objects, and how to read object value input from a file using while loop. I will see you in the next video, which we will talk about if a member variable is an array.